Um, I feel that I have a lot to offer to the office. I have been fairly disappointed with a lot of our leadership in Washington just because they don't seem to have any new ideas. The same methods have been used for the last 45 years, and all we've seen from that is basically the small towns are dying, young people keep leaving, and it seems like our opportunities keep getting more and more slim, and frankly, our leadership have done nothing to reverse this trend.
And then what are your legislative priorities?
Mostly domestic, and it would predominantly focus on rejuvenating rural America. It would be quite broad in a lot of ways because it revolves around three primary like legislative policies. One would be a 21st Century Homestead Act to incentivize people to move back to the small towns, and there's a myriad of ways we would do that. You can go to my website at arronforsenate.com if you want to look at the more details, but in a nutshell, we need more people, so Homestead Act, it worked before, it would work again. The other one would be the conservation economy. This has a lot of ways to basically incentivize farmers to grow certain crops in a certain way that would basically create new markets for carbon sequestering. This is a new market, so the growth potential would be massive, and it's utilizing tech we already have, and if it's a new market, then there's going to be a lot of profit to be made, and that can help, it won't lower your taxes, but your profits will be higher, so.
How do you feel about the situation at the border?
So the situation at the border is one of those very complicated ones because for one thing, the humanity of it is that we should, as just good people, care for others. At the other end of it, we don't want people living as underclass citizens within the country. We know that a hard border doesn't work. I mean, thousands of people are still getting through at Eagle Pass, even with thousands of National Guardsmen there, with thousands of Border Patrol. It just doesn't work. When there's a will, there's a way, and if there's a better life up here, people are going to be coming. So my view on that is instead of doing what doesn't work, we should instead just expand the visa program. One of the big things we learned with the DACA program was that if you give people a positive incentive to get into the system in some way, they will take you up on that. The issue with DACA was it was an executive order, not a law from Congress, so it could be overturned. It wasn't a long-term solution. But if you could create a better visa program, get people into the system, then they can't get paid below minimum wage, which gets rid of that competition factor. At the same time, from like a law enforcement standpoint, right now a lot of people who are here without papers don't go to the authorities. When a person who is employing them is cheating them, they have no avenue to go to like a judge, so they're being hurt on that, which then hurts everybody else because that means there are people within the economy getting paid less than what they're owed. And then on the other end of it, you just there's a lot of legal nightmares with it. You get into a car accident, somebody doesn't have insurance because they're not allowed to purchase insurance, and you could say, well, we need to get the people out, but at the same time, we also have this massive labor shortage. So I think it would just be easier to get people to voluntarily go into the system. You can try the hard borders, but it hadn't worked in the last 40 years, and we know DACA sort of worked, so I would rather build off of that than go with the same failed policies and wasting tens of billions a year.
And then a state chamber report shows immigrants fill many essential jobs, including in agriculture. So how does immigration relate to our workforce challenges?
We definitely need immigrants because of the positions they fill within our economy, not just in rural settings. One issue we have right now is this huge drain of labor in places like Nebraska because we are a predominantly rural state. People will move to the larger cities where there's more opportunities. That is pretty much unavoidable with the way wages work. Frankly, people just need to be getting paid more. Right now, workers are getting paid I think I've seen estimates that from the 1960s we're down to almost a quarter of real earnings, which hurts your ability to buy a house, start families, all of these things. So you can't really just take immigration on its own. You have to think of it holistically with the whole economy, and kicking people out or putting them into a position where they feel scared to go to the authorities is just going to create more headaches. Best solution is expand the visa program, which means they're in the system. Now, that doesn't make you a citizen. You won't be able to, vote, or maybe you wouldn't qualify for a lot of those federal, welfare programs, but we'd know who you are, and, well, it's just a matter of bureaucracy at that point, so. No.
And then when it does come to agriculture, what would federal priorities be?
So obviously we need to keep insurance programs because weather is getting pretty gnarly out there. But I suppose the biggest thing I want to do is the conservation economy, which would involve basically growing a lot of high volume crops because this is where I'm going to go into the weeds a little bit with one of my ideas, but essentially it's a carbon sequestering scheme which would involve growing high volume crops because 90 to 95% of all dry plant matter, so like if you have 100 pounds of grass that is dried out, there's no moisture in it, 95% of that is just dry carbon from the air, and if you can put that somewhere where it cannot decompose, you've removed it from the system. So it would be a good way of combating climate change, which would be financially beneficial to people who live out here in the Great Plains or the rest of the Midwest, while at the same time people who live in the more liberal coast would enjoy it because, well, it's actually, making a substantial step towards tackling climate change. Agriculture is in a prime position to do this because we can do things at scale like no one else can. We're the ones who, have the entire countryside, all them rolling hills. So there's a lot of potential out there. And frankly, no other market's really going to be growing. There's no one left to export beef to. The whole world is now one big market. So when it comes to new horizons or frontiers, we need to be thinking more creatively. This stagnant mindset of the last 45 years is just not going to work.
And then, do you support funding for American allies in Israel and Ukraine?
I believe we should support our allies who are beneficial to our strategic interests. Ukraine is essential because it is currently protecting the entire eastern flank of NATO. The last thing we want are Russian tanks rolling into Poland because that's an Article 5 situation and that makes the threat of nuclear war extremely high. In the situation of Israel, I do not mind them getting funding, but right now they are detrimental to our long-term interests. We, broadly speaking, want to get out of the Middle East but maintain security in the area, and that will not happen if Israel keeps up its ongoing onslaught in Gaza. I mean, right now they're pushing into Rafah and a lot of civilians are being massacred, and frankly, I don't think we would tolerate this if it was any other ally. So in that sense, I think maybe we should start conditioning aid to them because they need to pull back. Because if this continues to antagonize people in the region, you're going to see Iran get more assertive. You're going to see the Arabs, who we had been making a lot of progress with, start to back off. Their leadership might be fine with this, but the people are not. So it's a complicated situation, but we need to de-escalate the situation.
And then, what would you say to Nebraskans who feel left behind by the tone of modern politics?
You're not wrong. There's a bit of a debate in Nebraska right now whether or not we should get rid of the split electoral college system we have. I'm firmly against this. Now, even though it would benefit the Republican Party, it does not benefit Nebraska, which I think we should really have priority on, because Omaha being a swing district means the federal system has to pay attention to us. Out of all the Great Plains states, Nebraska is the only one, with the exclusion of Iowa, that gets visits from the presidential candidates. The Dakotas are ignored, Wyoming's ignored, Montana, Kansas. They don't ever see any of these people show up. Why? Because they're assured vote. We actually had half as many visits as California. California is another state that doesn't get any visits because why would you? It's a solid blue state. So that is a good thing for us to do. I think, broadly speaking, we will continue to be ignored as long as we keep losing people and we have nothing to really offer people to stay here. This is why I think if we can start leading on climate change initiatives, if we are the solution, the coastal states will see that and invest in us. And That's probably the best chance we have for long-term success. That's also why the 21st Century Homestead Act would be great, because it would get more people here, it diversifies the economy, creates a broader tax base, and we would have more relations with people from the larger communities who would likely be the ones moving here from places like overcrowded New York, LA, Denver, that sort of thing.
And then with you running, what is your hope here?
Kind of to just stop with the whole, this is my side of the fence, this is my side of the fence. We're one country. We need to be working on pragmatic solutions that we know have worked in the past. Homestead Act worked at getting people out here. We know it would work again. When the federal government decides to make a new market like they did with ethanol, it worked. That's basically the framework I want to use to do this carbon program. Going with the things that we know that work, and we all need to work together on this. This antagonism is not going to be good for us long term. And frankly, Americans are more similar than we are different at the end of the day. I've talked to people from the panhandle of Nebraska all the way to the Missouri River. Essentially, we all just want a better life for the next generation, and frankly, that's what our politicians should be focused on.
And then, with Deb Fischer running as well, and she's been doing it for a long time, do you think you can beat her?
It would be a challenge. She has a lot of entrenched resources. She's got a lot of out-of-state money. That is a very hard thing to overcome. The money factor in of itself is almost impossible then for a lot of challengers to actually step in. So I know it's an uphill fight, but for everyone that I can talk to, as limited as that is, because I am a full-time farmer, so I can't really hit the campaign trail all that hard, or at least not as hard as I would like to. It's an uphill task, but no politician should be able to run unopposed. That's why I'm doing this out of partially principle, but I also think I have some good ideas, and as long as those ideas get out there and get picked up, that would be all worth it.
And why do you think you'd be a good fit?
I don't get scared easily, so that would be good. I think I've got a lot of, frankly, good ideas. I think public service should be that service, and if I wanted to make money, I could easily be doing something else. Farming, is not a get-rich-quick scheme. But frankly, that just doesn't interest me. In the long run, I want to see the country prosper more. I want to see people happy. I don't want us to be, a lot of our current politicians are very susceptible to groupthink. Right now, I am particularly nervous with how Social Security has been getting treated as something that might get hacked away at, which would be detrimental, especially to a state like ours who has an older population. That loss of money would be staggering, and, we keep hearing it from the higher echelons of the GOP that they want to cut entitlements, which means they're coming for Social Security.